to protect the deceased from harm after being bitten by the snake. So he believed that, sorry to say stupidly, and then he consent to be bitten by the snake, and then he died. In this case, the question was that whether it was a valid consent. It was held by the court that the consent was not a valid consent because he gave his consent under a belief that it was under a misconception of fact. He believed that the snake charmer had the power to stop such harm, to save him from any harm of being bitten by the snake. Therefore, the consent was not a valid consent. There are 4 provisions in the Penal Code which provide protection from criminal liability arising from consent. Section 87, Section 88, Section 89, and Section 92. So these are the provisions. 1, 2, 3, 4 provisions. So let's look at each one of these provisions. So let's look at the first one, Section 87. Okay, Section 87. Act not intended or not known to be likely to cause death or grievous hurt done by consent. Nothing which is not intended to cause death or grievous hurt, and which is not known by the doer to be likely to cause death or grievous hurt. So under this provision, in order to be able to rely on the defense of consent under Section 87, the offender must not have any intention to cause death or grievous hurt, and he doesn't know that his act is likely to cause death or grievous hurt. If he intends to cause death or grievous hurt, it is not a valid consent. Meaning that if, let's say, the victim consent to be killed, for example, he knows that at the end the victim will die, that is not a valid consent. That is not a valid consent. So this consent does not extend to causing death. It does not extend to causing death. If someone agrees to be killed, it will not. The offender, the one who kills him, will not be able to rely under Section 87 because it does not extend to causing death. Video here, nothing is an offense. Nothing is an offense. Yeah? Nothing. Nothing is an offense. Nothing is an offense. So when nothing is an offense, meaning that this is an absolute defense, but it must not intend to cause death or grievous hurt, and he doesn't know that it is likely to cause death or grievous hurt. Is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause or be intended by the doer to cause to any person above 18 years of age. And the victim must be above the age of 18 years. Under Section 87, in order for the offender to be able to rely under Section 87, the victim who gives his consent must be above the age of consent. Who has given consent, whether express or implied, to suffer that harm. or by reason of any harm which it may be known by the doer to be likely to cause to any such person who has consented to take the risk of that harm. So in this situation, if let's say the victim consent to take the risk of the injury or the harm, then the offender may be able to rely on the defense under Section 87. So usually, this provision is applicable to the situation of sport. For example, let's say boxing, for example, the sport of boxing, for example. They box, what they call or wrestling, for example. They wrestle or they box, they what they call punching each other. And let's say in the process of doing so, he causes injury to the victim, for example, to one of the to his opponent, for example. So in this situation, the offender may be able to rely on the defense of consent under Section 87. Wrestling, for example, wrestling, um, boxing, boxing. Tapi memang gila lah kadang-kadang. Sometimes it's quite crazy. What call this kind of sport. For example, wrestling. To the extent that they want blood to be flowing from both parties. Then on the what they call the spectators. The what they call the person or the people coming there paying for the tickets. They are willing to pay more. They are willing to pay a very high price if, let's say, blood flowing from the both parties. So this is quite crazy. You can see the what you call the controversial issue in England, I think, last week, where what you call the fight until until blood flowing from them. But the spectators among the spectators, among the people coming to see the sport, the wrestling, were children. They were children coming there, so it was some sort of controversial for that thing. So this is the example can be seen under the illustration to Section 87. A and Z agree to fence with each other for amusement. Fence is some sort of sport. This agreement implies the consent of each to suffer any harm, which in the course of such fencing may be caused without foul play. And if A, while playing fairly, hurts Z, A commits no offense. So this is the defense under Section 87, consent. So among the ingredients, he must not have any intention to cause death or grievous hurt, and he doesn't know that it is likely to cause death or grievous hurt. And the victim must be above the age of 18, and the victim has consent to take that risk. That is under Section 87. However, if the doer intends or knows that death or grievous hurt will be caused, then Section 87 will not be applicable. For example, the game whereby they will fight each other till one of them dies. He will only win after he kills his opponent, for example. And the opponent agrees to that, this type of games, this type of contests. So if that is the case, then it is not a valid consent. So the one who kills can be charged for the offense of murder. But perhaps you may be able to rely on the defense under Exception 5 to Section 300. But that is not an absolute defense. under under Section 87, he will still be convicted for culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The case of Nga Sui Kin against Emperor, the appellant was charged for causing the death of the deceased due to the injury that he suffered. Prior to that, the deceased told the appellant that he was da-proof. Da-proof was a sharp-edged instrument. So when you say da-proof, meaning he was immune, yeah, he was that kind of instrument could not do any harm to him. Kebal, eh? So that kind of the da or any sharp instrument cannot do any harm to him. He told the appellant to test by cutting his right arm. He told the appellant test his he was a da-proof or kebal, cut his hand, his right arm, and then the appellant, believing that, cut the right arm of the victim, and the victim was bled to death. In actual fact, he was not da-proof. He died after his arm was being cut by the appellant. The conviction against him was set aside because he has no intention to cause the death of the deceased, and he did not use great force, and it cannot be said that he intended to cause the death or grievous. So from this case, it was found out by the court that he did not have the intention to kill, he did not have the intention to cause death, he did not know that the victim was, he believed, yeah, he believed that the victim was da-proof. He believed that the victim, the sharp instrument was not able to do any harm to the victim. He believed that. Because of that, the court held that he was able to rely on the defense of consent, because the victim consent for the accused to use that sharp-edged instrument to strike onto his arm, and he thought that that would not do any harm to the victim because of what the victim told him. So the court held that he was allowed the defense of consent. And then Section 88, another provision is Section 88. Under Section 88, act not intended to cause death, done by consent in good faith for the benefit of a person. Section 88 says nothing is an offense. So meaning that this is also an absolute defense, which is not intended to cause death. So the offender, the accused, must not have any intention to cause death. If he has the intention to kill, then Section 88 will not be applicable. Nothing is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause, or be intended by the doer to cause, or be known by the doer to be likely to cause, to any person for whose benefit it is done in good faith. But if you look here, the difference, the main difference between Section 87 and Section 88 is this, yeah? To any person for whose benefit it is done. To any person for whose benefit it is done. To any person for whose benefit it is done. Meaning, if it is done for the purpose of the victim, in good faith, and who has given consent, the victim has consent to take that risk. What kind of risk? The risk of being harmed, the risk of being injured. In good faith and who has given consent, whether expressed or implied. So the consent can be either expressly, can be made either expressly or impliedly, to suffer that harm. He takes, he consent to take the risk of that harm, or to suffer that harm, or to take the risk of that harm. So if you look here, to any person for whose benefit it is done, so this is usually the situation of, most of the time, it is the situation where of medical procedure, or surgery, for example. This can be seen under the illustration to section 88. The illustration says, a surgeon, knowing that a particular operation is likely to cause the death of Z, who suffers under a painful complaint, but not intending to cause Z's death, and intending in good faith Z's benefit, performs that operation on Z with Z's consent. A has committed no offense. So you look here, a surgeon operates on the victim in good faith for the benefit of that victim. But there is a risk. There is a risk. If let's say the surgery fails, then the victim may be injured, or he may die from that operation. So let's say if the victim dies from that operation, the surgeon may be able to rely on the defense of consent under section 88. So the main difference between section 87 and section 88 is that under section 88, this is for the benefit of the victim, whereas under section 87, it's not necessary for the benefit of the victim. And then section section 88, this is, I've already explained just now, section 88. So what is meaning of good faith? Good faith means the act must be done with due care and attention. The good faith is defined under section 52. Why good faith? Because section 88 says that it must be done in good faith. Done in good faith. It is done in good faith. So that's why we have to look at the meaning of good faith. So what is good faith? Good faith is defined under section 52. The act must be done with due care and attention. If it is done with due care and attention, then it is done in good faith. And then if you look at section 80 on section if you look at section 92, if you look at section 92, good faith, for the benefit of person, under the exception, under the explanation, under the explanation to section 92, it states that mere pecuniary benefit. But what is pecuniary? Pecuniary meaning monetary, in the form of money. Mere pecuniary benefit is not benefit within the meaning of sections 88, 89, and 92. For example, let's say the victim consent to be operated whereby one of his kidneys being taken out because he needs money, for example. Let's say he is in dire needs of money, so he needs to sell his kidney, one of his kidneys. He need to sell in order to get money because he is in dire need of money. So he consent to take the risk because he needs money. If let's say something happened to him, let's say he dies, then the surgeon may not be able to rely on the defense under section 88 just now, under section 88, because pecuniary benefit is not considered as benefit under section 88. But this is pecuniary benefit. If it is for family, for example, or for friends, even for friends, he agrees to be operated because he wants to donate his kidney to his friend or his family member, then section 88 is still applicable. Section 88 is still applicable. Yeah? Or at least section 87. Yeah? Okay, let's look at this another provision. Yeah? Okay, so let's look at the case of Sukaru Kobiraj against Empress. The appellant was unskilled surgeon. He was unskilled surgeon, and he operated a man, and that man died due to hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is bleeding, yeah? Internal bleeding. The court held that there is insufficient element of good faith, since he knew that he did not possess enough knowledge and skill, and he experimented it with the deceased. It could not be said that the deceased had consented to take the risk when he was unaware of this fact. So in this case, he did not have the skill to do the surgery, but he did not inform this to the victim. So even though the victim consent, but the consent was not valid because it was given under he was not fully aware of that situation. He did not know that the appellant did not have the skill to do the surgery. Therefore, the appellant was not able to rely on the defense under section 88. It also covers corporal punishment. Corporal punishment, yeah. It also covers corporal punishment by guardians and school teachers for the purpose of correctional behaviors of the children. Corporal punishment meaning caning, for example, caning to the children. Caning to the children in order to teach him a lesson, teach him or her a lesson. For example, children not doing their homework, and then the school teacher has to punish with caning, for example. So this is allowed because if let's say the children or the parents try to charge him or try to make a police report, charging him for the offense of causing injury to his son, then the teacher may be able to rely on the defense under section 88 because he does that for the benefit of that child. The child who is above 12 years is said to give an implied consent to subject himself to the discipline and control of the school authorities. This was in the case of Ma Ba Tao and approved in GB Gatge against Emperor. Sekarang dah susah lah ya. Sekarang tetap dah banyak ibu bapa yang terlalu manjakan anak kan. Maknanya kalau cikgu hukum mungkin mak ayah je akan marah sangat ya. Zaman saya dulu memang cikgu dia pukul aja ya. Ayah dia tak kisah pun. Zaman sekarang Bukanlah semua, ada mak ayah kisah juga. Tapi majoritinya tak. Asalkan anak dia belajar lah supaya asalkan tak cedera. Yang berkekalan ya. But now it's very different ya. It's very different. Okay, but the law is still protecting the children the children the teachers yang tadi according to the case of Mao Ba Tao. And then section 89, another provision is section 89. So let's look at section 89. Section 89, act done in good faith for the benefit of a child or person of unsound mind by consent of guardian. Nothing which is done in good faith for the benefit of a person under 12 years of age or of unsound mind by the consent either expressed or implied of the guardian or other person having lawful charge of that person is an offence by reason of any harm which it may cause or be intended by the doer to cause or be known by the doer to be likely to cause to that person, provided that this exception shall not extend to A, the intentional causing of death or to the attempting to cause death, B, the doing of anything which the person doing it knows to be likely to cause death for any purpose other than the preventing of death or grievous hurt or the curing of any grievous disease or infirmity, C, the voluntary causing of grievous hurt to or to the attempting to cause grievous hurt, unless it be for the purpose of preventing death or grievous hurt or the curing of any grievous hurt or infirmity, and D, the abatement of any offence to the committing of which the offence it would not extend. So generally, section 89 is very similar to section 88. The only difference is that this is similar to section 88, whereby this is for the benefit of the victim. So this is for the benefit of the victim. The victim takes the risk of being harmed, of being injured. But the what I call the offender is doing this for the benefit of the victim. Similar to section 88. The only difference is that under section 88, the victim gives his consent. Whereas under section 89, it is the guardian of the victim that gives his consent. Why? Why is it the guardian that gives consent? Because the victim is either below the age of 12, meaning he is not able to give his consent because he is below the age of 12, or he is of unsound mind. Because he is of unsound mind, he is not able to give consent. Therefore, his guardian is giving consent for the person for that person of unsound mind to take the risk of injury or the risk of death. So this is the difference and similarity between section 88 and section 89. An example can be seen under illustration to section 89. A, in good faith for his child's benefit without his child's consent, has his child cut for the stone by a surgeon, even though the child did not consent. But the consent is given by the guardian, by the parents. A, knowing it to be likely that operation will cause the child's death, but not intending to cause the child's death. A is within the exception in as much as his object was the cure of the child. And then section 92. Section 92, act done in good faith for the benefit of a person without consent. Section 92 is without consent. Actually, it's similar to section 88. It's similar to section 88 and section 89. The difference is that under section 92, it is the what we call the risk of injury is done without the victim's consent. Let's look at this provision. It's done in good faith for the benefit of person without consent. Nothing is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause to a person for whose benefit it is done in good faith, even without that person's consent. So here under section 92, it is without the victim's consent. If the circumstances are such that it is impossible for that person to signify consent, that the victim is not able to give consent, or if that person is incapable of giving consent and has no guardian or other person in lawful charge of him from whom it is possible to obtain consent in time for the thing to be done with benefit. So it is similar to section 89, 88 and 89. It is done for the benefit of the victim, but the difference between section 92 and section 88 and 89 is that the victim does not give consent. Why is it that the victim does not give consent? Because the victim is not able to give consent. For example, he is unconscious. For example, the victim is unconscious, and the guardian, the hospital is not able to contact the guardian. For example, they don't know who the guardian for the victim, who is the guardian for that victim. For example, he doesn't have any contact number for the guardian. And if let's say he wants to publish that in a newspaper or in any circular, it will take time. And that what we call victim has no time. If let's say he wait for another 1 hour or 2 hours, the victim will definitely die. So they have to operate on him. If they operate, then there is a possibility that he may survive. There is a possibility that he may survive. But there is also a risk of death. But if he doesn't operate on him, then he will definitely die. Of course, this is Allah willing, but generally, medically, it is not possible for him to survive without any medical intervention. So if that is the case, then the surgeon operates on him in order to without the victim's consent. Then, and let's say something happened to the victim, the surgeon can rely on the defense under section 92, even though the victim doesn't give his consent to that surgery. So this is the defense under section 92. An example can be seen under left section A. Zack is thrown from his horse and is insensible, meaning he is unconscious. A surgeon finds that Zack requires to be trepanned. A, not intending Zack's death, but in good faith, for Zack's benefit, performs the trepan before Zack recovers his power of judging for himself, some sort of treatment. A has committed no offense. So in this case, even though it was done without the victim's consent, surgeon may be able to rely on the defense under section 92. The case of public prosecutor against Dr. Nadasan Kanalingam, The accused was charged under Section 312 of the Penal Code for causing a woman's miscarriage. There is an exception in the Penal Code where a medical practitioner may, in good faith, do so if he was of the opinion that the continuance of pregnancy will involve the mental or physical health of the pregnant woman. But in this case, there was no indication that the woman's situation fell into this exception. Thus, he was not entitled to the defense because it was not a situation where what we call the victims was in danger. The victims, health was in danger. So it was not something which is of imminent. So the court held that he was not the surgeon was not entitled to rely on the defense of consent, even though the victim consent to take the risk of that miscarriage, aborting the pregnancy. But it was very dangerous and it was of no benefit to that woman. So the court held that he was not entitled to rely on the defense of consent. Okay, we have finished off with the defense of consent. Let's take a 10 minutes break. Let's take a 10 minutes break. We continue at 9:15, a quarter past 9, with the defense of duress, inshallah. So let's take a 10 minutes break, inshallah. So let's look at another topic, another defense. The defense of duress. The defense of duress. So the defense of duress, is stated under Section 94 of the Penal Code. Section 94 of the Penal Code states, except murders. So this defense, the defense of duress, is not applicable to murder, meaning killing someone. If let's say he is forced to kill someone, and then he kills the victim. He kills the victim because if he doesn't do that, then he will be killed, for example. So he's being forced. He's under duress. He may not be able to rely on the defense of duress. So this defense of duress is not applicable to murder, meaning killing another person. So except for murder, offences included in Chapter 6, punishable with death, and offences included in Chapter 6, capital A. Meaning that this defense is also not applicable to offences under Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is offences against state, trying to topple the government, for example. Punishable with death. Not all provisions under Chapter 6, but only provisions where the punishment is death. So it's also not applicable. And offences included in Chapter 6A. So what is Chapter 6A? Chapter 6A. This is chapter 6, offences against state, from section 121 to section 130A, but not all provisions, only the provisions where the punishment is death. And then offences under chapter 6A. Offences against under chapter 6A, that this is offences relating to terrorism, and this is applicable to all provisions, from section 130 capital B up until section 130 capital T capital A, all this provision, chapter 6A. But under chapter 6, only if the punishment is up to death. If the punishment is death. For example, let's say section 121. Example, section 121. Okay, let's say section 121. Whoever wages war against Yang Pertuan Agong or against any rulers of the state, any of the rulers or Yang Pertuan Negeri, or attempts to wage such war or abets the waging of such war shall be punished with death. Shall be punished with death. Meaning that if, let's say, he is forced to wage war against Yang Pertuan Agong, he is under duress, he may not be able to rely on the defense under section 94. Under section 94. Okay. Section 94 says, except for murder, offences included in Chapter 6, punishable with death, and offences included in Chapter 6, capital A, nothing is an offence which is done by a person who is compelled to do it by threats, which at the time of doing it reasonably cause the apprehension that instant death to that person will otherwise be the consequence. Nothing is an offence, meaning this is also an absolute defence, which is done by a person who is compelled, he is being compelled, he is being forced to do such act. He is being compelled, he is being forced, he is under duress to do it by threats, which at the time of doing it reasonably cause the apprehension that instant death. And the threat must be of instant death. Not only death, but it must be with instant death. For example, let's say if you must steal the property of Ahmad, for example. If you don't do that, then I will cut your hand. So that is not section 94 will not be applicable. Why? Because it is only applicable if the threat is death. If you do not do that, then I will cut your neck now. So this is instant death. Then only the accused may be able, or the offender may be able to rely on the defense under section 94. So it's very strict. It's very restricted. The what they call the defense under section 94. And instant death only to that person, not to his family, for example. No, this provision is only applicable if the threat of instant death to that person, to the victim, will otherwise be the consequence, provided that the person doing the act did not of his own accord or from a reasonable apprehension of harm to himself short of instant death place himself in the situation by which he became subject to such constraint. Provided that, provided that the person doing the act did not of his own accord or from a reasonable apprehension of harm to himself short of instant death, place himself in the situation by which he became subject to such consent. If he put himself in such situation, for example, he become a member of gang robbers, for example, then he may not be able to rely on the defense of duress. Explanation 1. A person who, of his own accord or by reason of a threat of being beaten, joins gang of robbers, knowing their character, is not entitled to the benefit of this exception on the ground that of his having been compelled by his associates to do anything that is an offense by law. Explanation 2. A person seized by gang robbers and forced by threat of instant death to do a thing which is an offense by law, for example, a smith compelled to take his tools and to force the door of a house for the gang robbers to enter and plunder it, is entitled to the benefit of this exception. So the requirement is that the threat must be of death and the death must be instant death. The threat is directed at the person of the accused himself, not to his family member. So this is quite strange, because it's only limited to the victim. If the threat is to his wife, for example, if the threat is to his children, for example, then he may not be able to rely on the defense under Section 94. The threat must continue to exist at the time of doing the act. Restriction of the defense, as I've already explained, is not applicable to murder. It is not applicable to the offences under Chapter 6 of the penal, which is punishable with death, and also the offences under Chapter 6, capital A. In the case of armed prosecutor against Lynch, where it was held that if a person chooses to be in IRA, IRA is a terrorist group, which is known to him, that will use violence, he cannot claim that he is under duress if he is being compelled to commit crime, because he put himself in such situation. Therefore, he may not be able to rely on the defense of duress, on the defense of being compelled. In Muhammad Yusuf bin Haji Ahmad, the court held that if the accused placed himself in a situation by which he became subject to threats of another person, the provisions of Section 94 do not apply. Elements of the defense of duress. Number 1, the threat must be of instant death. If it is not instant death, then he may not be able to rely on the defense under Section 94. Why is that so? Because it is clearly stated under Section 94. This can be seen in the case of Queen Empress against Latif Khan, where it was held that nothing but fear of instant death would be a defense to a policeman who tortures anyone by order of his superior. He's being ordered by his superior to torture the victim. He feared of being being taken disciplinary action by the superior, by his superior. The court held that it was not sufficient. He was not able to rely on the defense under Section 94, even though he was scared, he was being compelled by his superior. Why? Because the threat under Section 94 must be of instant death, not of being being bullied by the superior or being taken disciplinary actions by the superior. No, that is not sufficient because of the clear provision of Section 94, which requires the threat of instant death. The threat must be of instant death. This can be seen in the case of Maganlal and also the case of Tan Seng An. In the case of Maganlal, the court held that the threats of future violence will not generate the defense of duress. For example, if you do not do that, then I will kill you. but it is not but the threat is to kill him in another 6 hours, for example, or tomorrow, for example. That is future violence. So it is not instant death. The threat must be now, then and now, immediately. They put the pistol to his head, for example. You must do that thing. If not, then you will die. So that is instant death. In the case of Tan Seng An, it was held that there was no duress present or continuing when the appellant went out in the car with the other Chinese men. The fact the Chinese man left the parcel in his house when he refused to cooperate to keep the parcel was not sufficient to raise the defense of duress. The defense of duress, in order to be successfully pleaded, it must be imminent, extreme, and persistent. The threat must be of instant death. Because it was not of instant death, therefore, the court held that he was not entitled to rely on the defense of duress. And then the threat must be directed at the accused person. If the threat is to kill his child, to kill his wife, then this provision is not applicable. This is strange, because this is very serious. If the threat is to kill his wife or to kill his children, then it is much more serious than the threat to himself. But unfortunately, the Section 94 does not cover this. Perhaps this is the defect of Section 94. And then the menace of threat must be present at the time of the act, meaning the threat must be there. The threat of death must be there at the time of he commits the criminal act. The accused person who committed the crime after the threat has lost its effect cannot rely on the defense of duress. If, let's say, the threat of instant death has stopped, then he may not be able to rely on the defense of duress. It must continue. At the moment of committing the crime, the duress, the threat of instant death must continue. Similarly, if he has had a chance to rescue himself, to save himself, or to go to the authorities, but he continues to commit the crime, then he may not be able to rely on the defense of duress under Section 94. In the case of Muhammad Yusuf bin Haji Ahmad against the public prosecutor, it was held that there must be a reasonable fear at the very time of instant death. If the offender is committed at the time when the threat of instant death has been removed, the accused person will not be able to raise the defense under Section 94. The court held that the fact that he had carried the bag for about 1.5 hours and placed the bag on the platform while purchasing the ticket to Padang Besar shows that the mission has been completed. He made no attempts to approach any member of the public or authorities for help when he had a chance to do so. Furthermore, the distance between the accused himself and the Thai man was 20 feet away, quite far. So it was not instant death. Even if there was any threat, but it was not of instant death, because he was not able, the Thai man was not holding any pistols, so he was not able to kill him immediately, because the requirement was instant death. He must be able to kill the victim immediately. And he had made no attempt to ask for help, even though he was quite far with the person, with the Thai man who threatened him. There was nothing to suggest that the threat was present and continuing at the time, but he still did not go to the authorities, but despite the fact that he had a chance to do so. However, that case was in contrast with Subramaniam, but this Subramaniam case was decided wrongly because of the clear provision of Section 94. And the threat must be objective in character. The accused must reasonably apprehend instant death, and the fear must be well-founded. A reasonable man apprehends death, not merely saying that he will kill, but he doesn't have any weapon with him, for example. And in Muhammad Yusuf bin Haji Ahmad against public prosecutor, although there was no express threat of death, the court held that the fact that the pistol was pointed at the vital part of the body, the head, for example, or the chest, for example, which normally results in instant death, was sufficient for the accused to reasonably apprehend death. So it was proper for him to rely on the defense of duress. So that's all under the defense of duress. Okay, any question, anything that you want to ask? Okay, if you do not have any question, or let's say if you have questions after reading again, after reading the notes, after reading the textbook, you have questions, then you may ask during the tutorial, yeah, to me if you under me, or to siapa your tutor, Dr. Ridwan ya, Dr. Ridwan ke Puan Mastika ya, and okay, to your tutor ya. Okay, that's all for today. I'll see you in 2 weeks time lah kan, because next week is a semester break, so I see you in 2 weeks time insyaAllah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Doctor.
Ya, sama.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.